Hungry Ukraine wants 5,000 artillery rounds a day. U.S. ramps up production to meet massive demand. The United States, U.S., is ramping up its industry to meet Ukraine's massive hunger for artillery shells, which has long been reported to outstrip American and European defense industrial manufacturing capacities. The DoD reported Assistant Secretary for the Army, Acquisition, Logistics, and Technology, Douglas R. Bush, noting the defense industrial efforts to hike ammunition production. As a whole, the team is doing great. We're both modernizing our industrial base while ramping up production, the news update from the DoD said. Aiming to produce 80,000 shells a month from the current capacity of 24,000 rounds, as Ukraine consumes nearly 15,000 in just a few days, the Department of Defense, DoD, has also surprisingly almost admitted that the situation was primarily brought about by Ukraine being armed from the U.S. military's ammunition stockpiles. To date, the U.S. has provided Ukraine with over 2,155mm artillery rounds, according to the Pentagon. With the war having entered its 17th month, observers are debating whether the U.S. and its European allies will continue to arm Ukraine despite its poor military prospects following an unsuccessful counteroffensive and at the cost of their military preparedness. Top Army official assures more production. The U.S. is committed to and will succeed at maintaining our stocks sufficient for training and readiness of the U.S. Army while also supporting our ally, Ukraine, with what they need, working as part of an international team to make sure that happens, Bush said. With over $43 billion in security assistance to Ukraine since the beginning of the war in February 2022, the armaments include over 2,000 Stinger anti-aircraft systems and more than 10,000 Javelin anti-armor systems, among other items. 155mm shells. Photo credits, U.S. Army 6. The assistance has been provisioned through drawdowns of existing U.S. stocks and through the Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative, the authority under which the U.S. procures capabilities from industry and partners, the report added. This suggests that the U.S. military felt a pinch from exhausting its stockpiles, which also became a part of Washington's continued policy of not directly intervening in the war. Why can't the U.S. produce ammunition and fast? William Courtney, former ambassador to Kazakhstan and Georgia and former special assistant to the president for Russia, Ukraine, and Eurasia, was quoted in a Newsweek article explaining why the U.S. lagged in mass manufacturing capabilities for regular ammunition in its defense industrial base. The primary cause is also cited for explaining why the U.S. found itself suddenly behind Russia and China in hypersonic technology, the military interventions in Iraq and Afghanistan. It was consequently unprepared for conventional wars with peer rivals with an equally advanced defense industrial and scientific base. For several decades, the U.S. engaged in lighter, counterinsurgency fighting in which large artillery fires were less critical. And the U.S. thought large-scale Russian military threats to Europe were improbable. Some years ago, the U.S. even removed every one of its tanks from Europe. Now hundreds are back. In retrospect, the U.S. and its allies realized they overinvested in new arms relative to ammunition, such as tube artillery shells and tactical missiles. Because of political pressure to save money, the U.S. and its allies did not retain or build enough redundant manufacturing capacity for ammunition, Courtney said. In March, U.S. Army Undersecretary Gabe Camarillo announced that the Army will boost production of 155mm artillery shells more than sixfold, to 85,000 a month by fiscal year 2028, costing about $1.45 billion to increase capacity to expand 155mm artillery production from 14,000 a month to over 24,000 later this year, and 85,000 in 5 years, according to Defense News. Russian artillery. And it was the 155mm ammunition, a standard howitzer round, whose shortage after being given to Ukraine that sent U.S. officials into a tizzy. Ukraine's massive appetite for artillery ammunition and the U.S. inability to keep up has been reported since June last year. A Guardian report, quoting the deputy chief of Ukraine's military intelligence, said how the Armed Forces of Ukraine, AFU, was firing 5,000 to 6,000 rounds every day, but with a ratio of only one piece for Russia's 10 to 15 artillery pieces. European armament stocks dwindling too. The senior leader to accept this was NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg. A February 14 CNN report quoted Stoltenberg saying at a conference, "The current rate of Ukraine's ammunition expenditure is many times higher than our current production rate. This is now becoming a grinding war of attrition. And the war of attrition is a war of logistics." He added that the waiting time for deliveries has increased from 12 to 24 months, meaning orders for weapons given now will only be delivered 2 years later. The same report reflected the tension among European defense officials, who said the political leadership is avoiding addressing the alarming shortage of ammunition from their stocks and their industrial weakness to produce more. A part of the reason could be the cutting of gas supply from Russia owing to the sanctions after the war, which resulted in massive power outages and industries shutting down, especially in Germany. A PBS report quoted Seth Jones from the Center for Strategic and International Studies, says the U.S. defense industrial base is not fully prepared to conduct an industrial-style war or to deter that kind of war. He added that one reason for the state of affairs was the lack of synergy between the U.S.'s military planning and the industrial and acquisition processes. The U.S. has had operational plans for major wars, but what hasn't happened is to tie those plans directly to current acquisitions, Jones said.